The 5 is now 4.
Okay.
Because one of them has I've successfully got that incubated, and you know, now it's now taking on a life of its own. You know, obviously, like many other people in this, you know, this is a business at the end of the day, so we're all looking for ways in which these ideas can be monetized. So generally, when I put ideas on the table, you know, in specific form, they are, you know, there is an associated business arrangement. But what I had planned to speak about today was just some of the general areas where I think you know, there are significant opportunities in the Web 2.0 space. I've got specific ideas that underlie some of those, and anyone who wants to, you know the full details can come and talk to me, and I'll be happy to.
Well, general will be good.
Share with them.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want me to run through what I was going to.
Sure, that'd be great.
This afternoon.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, generally, you know, I look for a hit rate of about, you know, if I get one good idea out of 100, then that's probably, you know, not bad. So I generate more useless ideas than I do good ones. So it follows that a bunch of these are complete rubbish. But that's how it goes, I guess. One area that I think is intriguing, I think now has its own word, or perhaps it always had a word and I just didn't know what it was, and that's the word haptics, which is this idea of connecting sensors in the real world into the virtual world. So, for example, you know, people are familiar with the concepts of virtual reality and these ideas of you know, wearing gloves and visors and all the rest of it to create immersive 3D environments. I think that's going to be absolutely huge. I think Second Life, World of Warcraft, those kinds of things that people are, you know, are familiar with. You know, Habbo Hotel would be another one. You know, there's definitely an enormous ecosystem that's going to grow out of all of that. But looking at Second Life, I think it's more the question than the answer. I'm old enough to remember when, if you were using email, you used a thing called CompuServe, and in return for handing over your money, CompuServe gave you some opaque 7-digit number or something, you know, and you became 12765.6283. I can't remember what my number was. I used to have it on my business card. And I remember thinking at the time that, well, that's great because I can now email other people, but feeling a little bit uneasy with the fact that it was obviously a walled garden, in that for me to communicate with you, you also had to have, surprise, surprise, a CompuServe again. Plus I needed to have this sort of Einstein-type memory to be able to associate in my head these completely opaque identifiers with people. I think the reason email went the way it went, as silly as it sounds, I think it was really important psychologically that people were able to bring their own names into cyberspace. So, for example, Sean.McGrath at propylon.com. If I wasn't able to call myself Sean.McGrath, then the value proposition of that communications device would be significantly reduced from my perspective. So I think that's one of the big mistakes that I think Second Life has made, in that they want to be more than just a game. You know, they wanted to say that, you know, this virtual world is actually going to subsume the 2D web world that we have now. And I think they could do that, but they're going to have to make some significant changes, and I think one of them would be to do with names. The other would be the walled garden that they are creating on the server side. I think what the reason the web really took off was that the web wasn't actually technology, the web was a collection of protocols. And the implementation of those protocols was a free and open. Anyone could go and create them if they wanted to. So, you know, Tim Berners-Lee wrote the first web browser and the first web server, but then of course technology moved on, and now you've got Apache and you've got Microsoft IIS and you've got all of those different technologies on the server side. And on the client side, it's again beginning to balloon with all sorts of different interesting browser technologies. So the reason that the whole thing took off was that it was completely open. It was just a collection of protocols. So I think what needs to happen for virtual reality to take off is for someone to just, you know, accept as a fact that creating a walled garden is probably a failed business plan. Even if you could afford to do it, which you probably can't at internet scale. And much better to try and invent an open protocol-based mechanism for creating virtual realities. Now, I think what would be what that would do is I think it would give us a new twist on the concept of a search engine, because I think what would happen as a consequence of that is that services, today's Google, would have to metamorphose into something which was no longer spidering for content, but actually spidering for the geometry of the virtual world that you had set up on your website. And then those search engine aggregators would then compete based on their ability to take all of that and render it into a realistic 3D environment. Mm-hmm. And I think allowing people to innovate on the client side of that and develop their own browser technologies is going to be really important to make the whole thing take off. Mm-hmm. But it's strange. I think what we're going to see is, there's case law precedent exists now that basically dictates that IBM.com is actually owned by the corporation IBM, and I can't go, and start messing with the name IBM.com. I think Second Life took sort of a Wild West attitude, which was like there was no necessary correlation between this world and the virtual world. So you could create your own geographical spaces, you could create your own namespaces. You could turn up to a business meeting dressed as a hamster if that's what you wanted to do. Mm-hmm. You could fly in through the windows if that's what you wanted to do. And although that's all really cool, and you can build some great games around that, it isn't conducive towards creating a business technology. So I think there's opportunities all over that whole virtual space, and I think a lot of the second mouse gets to cheese is one of my favourite phrases. I think a lot can be learned by looking at what the likes of Second Life hasn't done well, and using that as a point of departure. So that was one of the things I was going to talk about.